David Suchet kept Poirot's hat. After 25 years, 70 episodes, and 40 worn-out fake moustaches, the one thing he asked to take home from set was that bowler. He said in interviews he can't actually look at it without his chest tightening. And honestly, that one detail tells you everything you need to know about why the ending of this show breaks people in a way no other detective series ever has. As someone who's watched the entire ITV run more times than I'd ever admit out loud, and who still finds it impossible to rewatch without bracing for the full weight of what's coming, I've been sitting on this for a while. Because when you actually lay out what happens in those final 2 hours, you don't just see a great detective dying. You see a man losing his soul on purpose. You see an actor saying goodbye to a friend. And you see a story that Agatha Christie literally locked in a bank vault during the Blitz, because she thought she might die before the world was ready to read it. Let me walk you through it. Curtain, Poirot's Last Case, aired on ITV on November 13th, 2013. Christie wrote the novel in the early 1940s while bombs were falling on London and her husband Max was in the Middle East, and she stashed the manuscript away for over 3 decades. It wasn't published until September 1975, just months before her death in January 1976. The book caused such a stir that the New York Times ran a front-page obituary for Hercule Poirot on August 6, 1975. The only time in the paper's history a fictional character has received that honour. Think about that. A made-up Belgian with a wax moustache got a real obituary on the front page of the most important newspaper in the world. That's the cultural weight this character carried before David Suchet ever put on the costume. And here's where the heartbreak actually starts. Suchet didn't film Curtain at the end of his run, he filmed it first. When ITV greenlit the final 5 episodes in 2013, Suchet personally requested that they shoot Curtain before the others. He told Digital Spy directly, "One of the reasons we had to do Curtain first, I lost 2 stone. It was extraordinary preparing for the end. Not a pleasant thing to do, to know that I'm going to die." He called the 2 days in the studio where he played Poirot's death the hardest shoot of my life. Then after dying on camera, he had to pull himself together and shoot 4 more episodes pretending to be the lively, dapper, energetic Poirot of earlier years. Imagine doing that. Imagine acting out your closest friend's funeral, and then having to spend the next several months pretending he's still alive. He told Radio Times something I genuinely can't shake. "As a human being, losing your real family is always painful, but my saddest day as an actor was filming Poirot's death. I miss him in my life because he was my life for 25 years and I've lost my best friend." A 67-year-old man at the time, admitting he was grieving a fictional person the way you'd grieve someone you'd shared a house with for a quarter century. No PR spin in that. Now let's get to why the actual ending hits like a truck. If you don't know the plot, here's the bare bones. Poirot returns to Styles, the country house in Essex where he and Hastings solved their very first case together back in the mysterious affair at Styles. He's old now, he's confined to a wheelchair, his hair is dyed an absurd shade of black to hide the grey, his moustache is thinner, his hands shake. Hastings, recently widowed, comes when he's called, the way Hastings always does. And Poirot tells him there is a murderer at Styles. He calls the killer X. He won't say who. He only says that X has been involved in 5 previous murders, and another is coming. The killer turns out to be Stephen Norton, a bird-watching, grey-haired, stammering, harmless-looking man who walks with a limp and gets faint at the sight of blood. Norton has never killed anyone with his own hands. He doesn't have to, he's an Iago. He finds people's hidden bitterness, their jealousies, their resentments, and he whispers. He suggests. He plants ideas. And then he watches as ordinary people destroy each other while he stays clean. The law cannot touch him. There's no evidence, no fingerprints, no motive a jury would understand. So Poirot, the man whose entire life has been built on the idea that order, justice, and the little grey cells will always win, Poirot decides he has to murder Norton himself. Stop and feel the weight of that for a second. This is the same man who once turned in his own client. The same man who refused to bend his moral code for love, money, friendship, or convenience for over 30 years. And in his last living act, he picks up a pistol, shoots a man through the forehead, while the man is asleep, arranges it to look like suicide, and then goes back to his room. Then he chooses to die. The medication on his nightstand is amyl nitrite. It's a small ampule, the kind heart patients in the 1940s would crush and inhale during an angina attack. It would have saved his life that night. It had saved his life many nights before. He doesn't take it. Instead, he reaches past the medicine on the nightstand and grabs his rosary. He's a devout Catholic. He has been his entire life, though Christie and the show only quietly built that into the character over decades. And his last words, whispered to a God he believes will judge him, are, "Forgive me, forgive." That's how he goes, alone, in the dark, with a rosary in one hand and an unused dose of medicine inches from the other. I've watched that scene maybe a dozen times. It doesn't get easier. There's a specific shot where Suchet's eyes are open and unfocused, his lips barely moving, and you can see him deciding to die. No stunt, no effects. That's an actor who lost 2 stone of body weight to look the part, who'd been preparing for over a year to film exactly that moment, doing the work. And here's the layer most people miss. Norton's death isn't justice in the way Poirot's career has always defined justice. Poirot knows that. He says so in the letter he leaves Hastings, the one read in voiceover at the very end. The choice he makes is to damn his own soul to save other lives. He actually believes in the Catholic sense, that he's going to face judgment for this. And he goes anyway. He kills Norton, refuses his medicine, and offers himself up. He's the lamb on his own altar. There's something almost unbearable about that for a character who spent decades being a slightly vain, slightly fussy, slightly comic Belgian who corrected people's grammar and tucked napkins into his collar. The man who counted the toast points on his breakfast plate and demanded square eggs is the same man who, at the end, executes a serial manipulator and accepts hell as the price. The novel was written during the Blitz, and you can feel it. Christie wasn't sure she'd live through the war. Her London flat was bombed twice. She locked Curtin in a bank vault and gave the rights to her daughter Rosalind as a kind of insurance. If the worst happened, Rosalind would have a final Poirot novel to publish. The book sat in that vault for over 30 years. When it finally came out in 1975, Christie was 84 and dying. 8 months after publication, she was gone. So this ending isn't just a story. It's a goodbye Christie wrote to her own creation while she thought the world was ending. Suchet's version on screen carries all of that weight. You can feel it in every frame. Let me talk about the visual choices because they wreck me every time. When Poirot first appears in Curtin, he's wheeled into a frame that mirrors his very first entrance in the mysterious affair at Styles, which the show adapted as the opener of Series 3 back in 1990. The same staircase, the same hall, the same wallpaper, more or less. Hastings stands in roughly the same spot. Hugh Fraser, who played Hastings for the entire 25-year run, stands there with the camera lingering on his face just long enough that you can see him register what 23 years of fictional life have done to his friend. They had built that bond on screen and off. Fraser was at Suchet's side for decades. By the time they shot the reunion at the Styles, both men were essentially saying their goodbye to each other through the characters. The makeup team also stripped Suchet down. They removed the famous mustache for the death scene. After 70 episodes and dozens of fake mustaches glued to his upper lip, the producers showed him without it, and the effect is shocking. He looks naked, vulnerable, tiny. Whatever vanity Poirot had built around his appearance is gone. He's just an old man in a bed. A friend told me once she didn't even recognize him in that scene the first time she watched it. She thought it was someone else. Now, the ending. The literal final shot of the entire series. After Poirot dies, time passes. Hastings reads the letter. The voiceover comes in, Suchet's voice, from beyond the grave essentially. And Poirot says, "They were good days. Yes, they have been good days." And the camera lingers on Suchet's face, looking directly into the lens. Not at Hastings, not at a prop, at you, at everyone who ever watched. It's a fourth wall break, but it's also a thank you. The actor and the production break in format for 1 second to acknowledge that something had ended. I've seen plenty of TV finales. The Sopranos cut to black. Breaking Bad faded out on Walter White's body. 6 Feet Under did the famous death montage. Those endings are great, but I'd argue Poirot's is the only one where the lead actor literally looks into your eyes and says goodbye. There is no metaphor there. There's no ambiguity. He sees you. You see him. And then he's gone. Suchet talked about that moment in a Gold Derby interview from late 2013. He compared filming his final scenes to saying goodbye to a dear, dear friend. He was insistent. It's not me being theatrical. I've lived with this man for 25 years. Here's the part that gets me, and this is the weird specific detail that will probably stick with you. Suchet didn't just play Poirot, he kept a list. From the very beginning of the series in 1989, he carried around a small notebook with 93 character traits taken directly from Christie's novels. He'd add to it every time he found a new detail in the books. The way Poirot tipped waiters, the way he disliked tomatoes, the way he held cutlery. He completed every single Christie story featuring Poirot. Every novel, every short story, even the play Black Coffee, over the course of those 25 years. He's the only actor who has ever done that. Probably the only one who ever will. So when he says he lost his best friend, that wasn't a metaphor. He had spent more time inside the head of Hercule Poirot than most people spend with their own siblings. And then there's Hastings, Captain Arthur Hastings, played by Hugh Fraser since the very first episode. Hastings is the audience's eyes for the entire series. He's the dim, decent, loyal, loving heart of every story. In Curtain, he's a widower. He's lost his wife Bella. His daughter Judith is acting strangely. He's vulnerable in ways he's never been before, which is exactly why Norton targets him. The most haunting subplot of the finale is that Norton successfully manipulates Hastings to the point where Hastings nearly poisons a man he believes is sleeping with his daughter. He almost crosses the line. He almost becomes a murderer. And Poirot, half dead in a wheelchair, is the only thing standing between his oldest friend and a soul he can never get back. That's the level Norton operates on. He doesn't kill people. He turns the people you love into killers and lets you live with the rest of your life knowing what you did. So when Poirot kills Norton, it's not just abstract justice. It's a man saving his best friend's soul at the cost of his own. He literally sacrifices his afterlife for Hastings. Hastings doesn't know that during the events of the story. He only finds out when he reads the letter, after Poirot is in the ground. Now, why is the ending too painful to rewatch? For me, it comes down to 3 things layered on top of each other. First, the in-story ending is brutal in a way detective fiction almost never is. Poirot doesn't get a triumphant retirement. He doesn't get a quiet death surrounded by friends. He commits murder. He damns himself in his own theology. He dies alone, in pain, asking forgiveness from a God he's not sure will give it. Christie didn't write a victory lap, she wrote a martyrdom. Second, the meta-story is just as raw. Suchet was not pretending to be sad. The man lost 2 stone, filmed the death first, told reporters he'd lost his best friend, and looked straight into the camera in the final shot. The line between actor and character had completely blurred. Watching it, you're watching 2 endings happen simultaneously. The character ends, the performer ends. They go together. There's no clean separation. Third, and this is the one that took me years to articulate, Poirot's ending forces you to reckon with your own. This was a 25-year companion, a presence. For a lot of viewers, including me, those episodes ran in the background of huge stretches of life. School years, sick days, moves, breakups, Christmases. Whatever was happening, you could put on Poirot and the world made sense for an hour. He was the most predictable, comforting figure on television. And then in 2 hours, that was gone. The show ended. He died. The lights came up. And you sat there with the strange grief that comes from realizing that something you trusted to always be there had ended permanently. The episode aired in the UK with 8.16 million viewers. Most of them, judging by social media reaction at the time, Didn't expect to be that wrecked by a murder mystery. The reviews used words like shattering, devastating, and almost cruel in its emotional precision. There's a quote from Suchet I keep coming back to. He told Radio Times that Christie hinted on several occasions that the greatest gift from God to human beings is a husband and wife relationship, and that he tried to bring out, as he aged with the character, the idea that Poirot would have loved a companion, but no one could have put up with him. Poirot dies a bachelor. He dies without a partner. The only person who comes when he calls is Hastings, and even Hastings has to leave the room before Poirot lets himself slip away. There's a quiet loneliness in that ending that makes the moral weight of his decision land twice as hard. Most detective shows want you to leave on a high. Curtin wants you to sit in the silence. There's no last twist, there's no cliffhanger, there's no wink to a possible spin-off. It's the rare ending in television history where everyone involved made a conscious decision not to soften the blow. But Curtin sits in a different category. It's the only episode of Poirot I'd describe as a wound rather than a story. David Suchet kept the bowler hat. He said he can't quite bring himself to look at it for long. It sits somewhere in his home, a small, dark, formal little circle of fabric, the last piece of a man who didn't really exist. And somehow, against all reason, the most painful object in British television history. That's why, 13 years after it aired, when someone mentions Poirot in passing, my chest still does that thing. Just for a second. The way Suchet's must, every time he walks past that hat,